Clara Whitmore did not scream when she saw the wagon disappear into the white storm. She only stood there with a bundle of wet sticks in her arms, her thin shawl frozen against her shoulders, and watched the people she called family drive away, as if she had never belonged to them at all. The snow was falling hard in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. It came down in thick white sheets, covering the wagon tracks almost as soon as the wheels cut them into the ground. Clara was 19 years old, small from years of hard work and hunger, with a weak ankle that had never healed right after her stepbrother pushed her from a barn loft when she was 15. Her father had called it an accident. Her stepmother had called it a burden. That morning, they had stopped near a line of pine trees while the sky was still gray and quiet. Her father, Samuel Whitmore, had looked tired and afraid. Her stepmother, Ruth, had looked cold in a different way. Not the kind of cold that came from weather, the kind that lived inside a person. "Go gather wood," Ruth had said, "and do not come back with a handful like some useless child." Clara had looked at her father. He did not meet her eyes. That was when a small fear opened inside her chest, but she pushed it down. A daughter should not have to fear her own father. She told herself he was only ashamed. She told herself he would never leave her. She was wrong. When Clara came back from the trees, the wagon was already far down the trail, moving fast through the blowing snow. She dropped the sticks and limped after it. "Pa." Her voice cracked in the wind. The wagon did not stop. She saw her younger half-sister, May, turn around in the back of the wagon. For one moment, Clara saw the child's face through the storm. May raised one mittened hand, not waving, not calling, just reaching. Then, Ruth pulled the canvas flap shut. Clara kept walking until her ankle gave out, and she fell to her knees in the snow. The cold bit through her dress. Her hands sank into the powder. She stared at the trail, waiting for the wagon to stop, waiting for her father to come running back, waiting for any sign that love still had a place in the world. Nothing came back. Only snow. Clara stayed on her knees until her fingers burned. Then she forced herself up, because dying on that trail would have made Ruth right. Ruth had said many times that Clara was too weak for the West, too soft, too slow, too much like her dead mother. Clara did not want Ruth's last words about her to become true. She picked up her sticks and turned toward the trees. The storm grew meaner by the hour. The mountains vanished behind white fog. The wind pushed against Clara's body like hands trying to shove her down. Her ankle throbbed so badly that each step made her stomach twist, but she kept moving. She found a fallen pine with low branches and crawled beneath it. There was just enough space to block part of the wind. Her hands shook as she tried to strike a fire. The first spark died. The second died too. On the third try, a weak flame caught on dry bark hidden under the snow. Clara bent close and protected it with both hands, whispering to it like it was a living thing. "Please, please stay." The fire grew no bigger than a lantern glow, but it was enough to keep her awake. She had no food except a piece of hard bread in her coat pocket. She broke it into 4 tiny pieces and ate one. Her belly cried for more, but she tucked the rest away. Night came like a coffin lid. Every sound in the forest felt alive. Branches cracked under the weight of snow. Somewhere far off, a wolf cried. Clara held her small knife in one hand and tried not to think of her father's face. That was the hardest part. Not Ruth's cruelty, not her stepbrother's laughing when she limped, not even the cold. It was her father's silence. He had not shouted for the wagon to stop. He had not climbed down. He had not fought for her. That truth hurt worse than the storm. By morning, the fire was dead. Clara's boots were stiff. Her hair had frozen in pale strands around her cheeks. She tried to stand and nearly fell. The ankle had swollen badly in the night, but she wrapped it with a strip torn from her petticoat and began following the trail east. She did not know where it led. She only knew standing still meant death. The wagon tracks were almost gone. For hours, Clara moved through the mountain pass like a ghost. Her lips cracked. Her breath came thin. The snow rose past her ankles, then her shins. Once, she saw a dark shape ahead and thought it was the wagon. She stumbled toward it with wild hope, only to find a black stump half buried in snow. She laughed once, a broken little sound, then began to cry. The tears froze on her cheeks. By late afternoon, the sky darkened again. Another storm was coming, worse than the first. Clara knew it in her bone. Her body had started to feel strangely warm, which frightened her because she knew that was what happened before the cold took a person for good. She found a rocky hollow under a cliff and sank down inside it. Her legs would not carry her farther. She pressed the last piece of bread into her mouth, but she could hardly swallow. "I'm sorry, Mama," she whispered. The wind answered by throwing snow over her boots. Clara closed her eyes. Then something touched her face. At first she thought it was a dream. A warm breath. Then a low growl. Her eyes opened. A huge gray dog stood over her, its yellow eyes fixed on hers. Snow clung to its fur. Behind it, coming through the white storm, was a man. He was tall, wrapped in a buffalo coat, with a rifle across his back and a black beard silvered with frost. He looked like the mountain itself had taken human form and come down to judge her. The dog growled again. The man lifted one gloved hand, and the animal went silent. Clara tried to speak, but only a weak breath came out. The man crouched beside her. His eyes were dark and sharp, but not cruel. "Who left you out here?" he asked. Clara's lips trembled. "My family." The man's jaw tightened. He looked toward the fading tracks, then back at her. "Can you stand?" She tried. Pain shot through her ankle, and her body folded. Before she hit the snow, his arms caught her. Clara looked up at him, terrified and too tired to hide it. "Please don't hurt me." For a moment, something changed in his face. The hardness did not leave, but sorrow moved behind it. "I ain't the one who left you to die," he said. He lifted her like she weighed nothing and turned into the storm. The dog walked ahead, cutting a path through the snow. Clara fought to stay awake, but the world kept fading. She felt the man's coat against her cheek. She heard his heart beating strong and steady beneath layers of fur and wool. "What's your name?" she whispered. "Silas Boone." "Where are you taking me?" "My cabin." "Why?" Silas looked down at her, and through the blur of snow and fever, Clara saw something in his eyes that frightened her almost as much as the cold. "Because by morning," he said, "the men who left you may come looking for what they threw away." Clara's breath caught. Why would they come back? Silas held her closer as the storm swallowed the trail behind them. "Because a dead girl tells no story," he said. "But a living one can hang a man." Silas Boone's cabin stood deep in the pines, hidden where the mountain folded inward, and the wind could not strike it full. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, thin and gray against the white sky. To Clara, it looked like a place from a dream. Rough walls, a small porch, split wood stacked under a tarp, and one yellow window glowing in the storm. She was only half awake when Silas carried her inside. Heat hit her face first. Then came the smell of pine smoke, leather, coffee, and something cooking in an iron pot. The big gray dog pushed through the door ahead of them and shook snow across the floor. "Bear," Silas said. Down, the dog dropped beside the hearth, but kept its yellow eyes on Clara. Silas laid her on a narrow bed covered in heavy quilts and fur. Clara tried to sit up at once, but her body would not listen. "My boots," she whispered. "I'll dirty your bed." Silas looked at her for a long second, like those words hurt him in some quiet place. "Girl, you were near frozen under a cliff. I ain't worried about mud." He pulled off her boots carefully. When his hand touched her swollen ankle, Clara gasped and gripped the blanket. Silas stopped. "Broken?" he asked. "No, old hurt. Worse now." He said nothing, but his eyes moved over her torn dress, her thin shawl, her cracked lips, and the bruises on her wrists from where Ruth had grabbed her days before. Clara watched his face harden, little by little. He warmed broth and made her drink it slowly. She wanted to gulp it down, but each time she tried, he took the cup back and waited. "Slow," he said. "You eat too fast after freezing, your belly will turn on you." Clara obeyed because she had no strength left to argue. When the warmth moved through her, tears filled her eyes. She turned her face away, ashamed. Silas saw it anyway. "You crying from pain?" "No." "Then from what?" Clara swallowed. Kindness feels strange when you ain't had any for a while. Silas looked toward the fire. For a moment, he seemed older than he was. He was perhaps 38, maybe 40, with deep lines near his eyes and a scar running from his jaw down into his collar. He looked like a man who had buried most of his words years ago. "Sleep," he said. "Storm will hide this cabin tonight." Clara's eyes opened wider. Hide it from who? Silas did not answer right away. He went to the window and lifted a corner of the hide curtain. Outside, the snow rushed past in wild white waves, from men who are scared of what you know. Clara stared at him. "My father would not come back to kill me." The words came out weak, but she needed them to be true. Silas let the curtain fall. "Maybe not your father." Ruth's face rose in Clara's mind. Sharp mouth. Cold eyes. Hands that never shook when doing cruel things. Clara felt the broth turn heavy in her stomach. "My stepmother," she said. Silas nodded once. She knew what she was doing. Folks like that don't leave loose ends. The cabin went quiet, except for the fire. Clara looked at the door as if Ruth might already be standing on the other side. That night, Clara dreamed of wagon wheels turning over her mother's grave. She dreamed of May reaching through the canvas flap. She dreamed of her father holding the reins and staring straight ahead while Ruth smiled beside him. She woke before dawn with a cry caught in her throat. Silas was sitting in a chair near the fire, rifle across his knees. He had not slept. Bear lay at his feet, ears raised. "You heard something?" Clara whispered. "No, then why are you awake?" His eyes stayed on the door, because I believe bad men more than I trust storms. By morning, the worst of the blizzard had passed, but the world outside was buried. Snow rose nearly to the porch rail. Silas brought in more wood, checked the tree line, then returned with his rifle still in hand. Clara pushed herself upright. "I should leave once I can walk." Silas looked at her like she had said something foolish. "Leave to where?" "I don't know. That ain't a place. I can't stay here and eat your food." "You can if I say you can." Clara's pride rose fast. It was one of the few things Ruth had not beaten out of her. "I am not asking for charity." "No," Silas said. "You're asking for death because it sounds more polite." Clara went still. His voice softened just a little. "You can cook? Yes, mend? Yes, read? Yes, then you can work. Cabin needs hands. Winter is long. You stay till spring." Clara looked at the fire. A part of her wanted to accept at once. Another part warned her that every safe place had a price. "And what do you want from me?" Silas understood the question. She saw it in his face. He stepped back, giving her space though he was already across the room. "Nothing that would shame you." Her throat tightened. "No man has ever said that to me before." "Then, you met poor men." For 3 days, Clara healed inside that cabin. She cooked thin stew with beans and dried meat. She mended the torn sleeve of Silas's coat with careful stitches. She learned that Bear liked to sleep by the door, that Silas drank coffee bitter, and that he spoke only when words were needed. He never touched her unless helping her stand. He never looked at her like Ruth had warned all men would look. And somehow, that made Clara more afraid, not less. Because her heart began to rest near him. On the 4th evening, hoofbeats sounded through the trees. Bear stood so fast his claws scratched the floor. Silas reached for his rifle. Clara's blood turned cold. Through the window, she saw 3 riders moving between the pines. One was her stepbrother Eli. One was Ruth's cousin, Wade Mercer, a cruel man who carried a rope on his saddle and liked showing it. The 3rd rider was her father. Samuel Whitmore looked smaller than Clara remembered. His shoulders were bent, his beard white with frost, but he had come. Whether to save her or bury her, she did not know. A hard knock struck the door. "Boone," Wade called. "We know she's in there. Hand the girl over." Silas did not move. Clara gripped the blanket with both hands. "My father," she whispered. He came. Silas looked at her. "Don't mistake coming back for love." Outside, Wade shouted again. "That girl belongs to her family." Silas lifted the rifle and stood beside the door. "No," he said, loud enough for them to hear. "She was left in the snow. Mountain law says what a man throws away, he don't get to claim." Ruth's cousin laughed outside. "You taking her as your woman, Boone?" The cabin went silent. Clara looked at Silas, shocked and trembling. Silas's jaw tightened. He did not look at her when he answered. "If that is what keeps your hands off her," he said, "then yes." Clara's breath caught in her chest. Outside, Wade's laughter died. Inside, Clara stared at the mountain man who had saved her life, and for the first time since the wagon left her, she did not feel thrown away. She felt chosen. The word wife sat in the cabin like a burning coal. Clara could barely breathe. Silas Boone stood by the door with his rifle in his hands, broad shoulders still as stone. Outside, 3 riders waited in the snow, and somewhere behind them was Ruth Whitmore, the woman who had left Clara to die, and now feared what Clara might say if she lived. Wade Mercer spat near the porch. "You think saying it makes it true?" Silas opened the door just enough for the cold to cut into the room. In these mountains, a man's word still means something. Wade laughed, but there was anger under it. "Then bring her out, and let her say it." Clara's heart pounded. She looked at her father through the crack of the door. Samuel sat on his horse, with his head low, unable to meet her eyes even now. That hurt more than Wade's threats. A cruel man could be understood. A weak father was harder to survive. Silas turned his head slightly. "You don't have to speak," he said quietly. Clara stared at him. He had called her his woman to shield her, not to claim her. She understood that now. He had stepped between her and the men outside without asking for anything in return. Something inside her stood up before her body did. Clara pushed the blanket aside and rose from the bed. Pain shot through her ankle, but she held the wall and stayed standing. Silas moved as if to help her, then stopped when he saw her face. She limped to the door. The cold hit her skin, but she did not step back. Wade's eyes moved over her like she was an animal he had trapped. "There she is," he said. "Come on, girl. Your family is taking you home." Clara looked at her father. "Home?" Samuel flinched. "You left me in a storm, Pa." His mouth opened, but no words came out. Wade leaned forward in his saddle. She wandered off. That is the truth your father will tell if he wants to keep breathing. Clara looked from Wade to Samuel. The truth became clear then. Her father had not come to save her. He had come because Ruth and Wade had dragged him back to finish the lie. Silas stepped onto the porch. Bear came beside him, teeth showing, a low growl rolling from his chest. Wade's horse shifted nervously. Call off that beast. Silas did not. Clara lifted her chin. I did not wander off. Ruth sent me for firewood. Pa drove the wagon away before I came back. Eli watched from the back. May saw it too. At the mention of May, Samuel finally looked at her. His eyes were wet and broken. Clara, he whispered. She almost softened. Almost then she remembered the wagon tracks. Fast, straight and sure. No, she said. You do not get to say my name like it still belongs to you. Wade's face darkened. That is enough. He reached for the pistol at his belt. Silas fired first. The shot cracked through the trees and struck the pine branch above Wade's head. Snow dropped in a heavy sheet over Wade and his horse. The animal reared, and Wade cursed as he fought the reins. Silas's rifle was already steady again. Next one is lower. Eli looked terrified. He was only 17. Mean when Ruth stood behind him. Small when danger faced him alone. He turned his horse half away. Wade wiped snow from his face, rage burning red across his cheeks. You made a mistake, Boone. No, Silas said. I made a promise. Then Samuel spoke. She is telling the truth. The words came out weak, but they came. Wade turned on him. What did you say? Samuel's hands shook on the reins. I said she is telling the truth. Ruth wanted her gone. I let it happen. Clara felt the words hit her, not like surprise, but like a door closing for good. Samuel looked at her, crying openly now. I was afraid. Clara's voice stayed quiet. So was I. That broke him. He bent over the saddle like the cold had finally entered his bones. Wade pulled his pistol. Bear lunged with a roar. The dog hit Wade's horse before Silas could fire. The horse screamed and twisted. Wade's shot went wild, tearing into the cabin roof. Silas rushed forward, grabbed Wade by the coat, and dragged him from the saddle. They hit the snow hard. Wade fought like a snake, fast and dirty. He struck Silas across the jaw and reached for a knife. Clara saw the blade flash. For one frozen second, fear tried to take her back. Then she grabbed the iron poker from beside the door and limped into the snow. Wade lifted the knife toward Silas. Clara swung with everything she had. The poker struck Wade's wrist. The knife flew from his hand. Silas drove his fist into Wade's face. Once, hard enough to drop him flat. The forest went silent, except for Wade groaning in the snow. Silas looked at Clara. Blood marked his lip, and snow clung to his beard. You should have stayed inside. Clara's hands shook around the poker. You should have ducked faster. For the first time, Silas Boone smiled. Not much, just enough to change his whole face. Eli fled first. He turned his horse and vanished between the trees. Samuel stayed. He looked at Clara like a starving man looking at bread he had already thrown away. Come with me, he said. Please, I can make this right. Clara looked at him for a long time. No, Pa, you cannot. His face crumpled. I am still your father. She nodded slowly. Yes, and I am still the daughter you left behind. Silas tied Wade to his saddle and sent Samuel down the mountain with him, warning that if either man returned, they would not ride away again. Samuel looked back once before the trees swallowed him. Clara did not wave. When the silence returned, her strength left her. Silas caught her before she fell. This time, Clara did not pull away. Inside the cabin, he sat her near the fire and wrapped a quilt around her shoulders. His hands were gentle, almost unsure. I only said what I said to keep them from taking you, he told her. You owe me nothing. Not a name, not a promise, not a life." Clara looked at the fire. The cabin smelled of smoke and snow, and danger survived. Then she looked at him. "When you said it, I was not ashamed." Silas went still. Clara's voice trembled, but she did not stop. "All my life I was treated like something heavy, something broken, something people had to carry. But when you said I was yours, it did not feel like chains." His eyes softened in a way that made her chest ache. "What did it feel like?" Clara reached for his hand. His fingers were rough and scarred, but warm, like shelter. Outside, winter pressed against the cabin walls, but it could not enter. Not that night. Not after everything they had survived. Weeks passed. Clara healed. She learned to walk the short path from the cabin to the woodpile without help. Silas carved her a strong cane from ash wood and rubbed the handle smooth until it fit her palm. She cooked. He hunted. They spoke more in the evenings. Sometimes they laughed. Sometimes silence sat between them, but it was no longer empty. By spring, the snow began to melt from the high pines. Water ran over the rocks. Sunlight touched the cabin roof. The world opened again. Silas stood on the porch one morning with his hat in his hands. "Trail is clear enough now," he said. "If you want to go, I'll take you to Missoula. You can start fresh there." Clara looked at the mountains, then at the cabin, then at the man who had carried her out of death and never once made her feel owned. "And if I do not want to go?" Silas's throat moved. "Then I'll be grateful every day you stay." Clara stepped closer. "You chose me once to save my life." He shook his head. "I spoke fast that day, but I am choosing you now with a clear mind." Clara smiled through tears. "Then I choose you too." They were married 2 weeks later in a small church at the edge of Missoula, with Bear sleeping by the door and a preacher who smiled, when Clara limped down the aisle holding Silas's arm. She did not wear silk. She wore a simple blue dress she had sewn herself by firelight. Silas wore the coat she had mended. Neither of them looked rich. Neither of them looked perfect. But when Clara stood beside him, she no longer looked like a girl who had been left in the snow. She looked like a woman who had walked through the storm and found a home on the other side.